In this video, we'll show you how to install an aftermarket HD14 PMX-STG2 on a 2018 Street Glide. The PMX source unit is ready to go right out of the box. It's pre-configured with an optimized EQ curve, eliminating any requirement to flash the radio. This will allow you to experience the full potential of this audio system the way it was meant to be. All right, let's get started by removing the seat using a number 2 screwdriver. On this model, it's a thumb screw. Then we'll use a 1/2-inch socket to remove the ECU cradle out of the way to access the battery. Then once that's done, you can use a 10mm socket or Phillips screwdriver to disconnect the battery terminals. Now we're ready to remove the fairing. First, we'll install the service cover on the fender. Then we'll use a T27 Torx driver to remove 4 screws on the inside and 3 bolts that hold the visor in place. Now, it's best to have 2 people for this step, one to hold the fairing in position and the other to remove the screws. Once we pull up on the fairing, we'll disconnect the harness and remove it from the bike. Now we're ready to remove our speaker pods. We'll start by disconnecting the harnesses on the side and top of the pods by using a flathead screwdriver or a plastic removal tool. Then we'll use a 5/32 Allen to remove the 2 screws from the top of each pod. Now we'll move down and remove the 3 bolts from the lower inside using a 7/16 socket with the swivel joint and extension. These can be difficult to access, so we recommend detaching the lower harness panel with the number 1 Phillips to give you extra space. Finally, we'll use a 3/16 Allen to remove the 3 screws from each pod. Now we're ready to remove the factory equipment and install our new speakers. The TMS65 speakers included in your kit contain extra grills for road glide and tour pack installs. For our batwing fairing, we're going to use this grill with the 3 tabs. Note that there are left and right grills. We'll start by using a T25 Torx and remove 3 screws holding the factory grill. We'll use the same hardware to secure the new grill in place. Take note when installing, the logo will reside at the bottom. We'll use the same T25 Torx to remove 4 screws from the speaker pod and install the new speaker with the logo toward the bottom as well, and connect the red wire to the positive terminal and the black wire to the negative terminal. Once you're done, repeat the process on the other pod. Now that we have that done, we'll loosely thread the 2 screws on the top of each pod to ensure proper alignment. Once that's done, you can reinstall the lower inside bolts and re-secure your harnesses back in place. Finally, we'll use the 3/16 Allen driver to secure the outer 3 screws that hold the pods in place, and finish securing the 2 top screws on each pod. Now that we have that done, we're ready to remove the gas tank. We'll get started by disconnecting the gas line. Push up on the hose, and while sliding the fitting upward, pull down on the gas line. Next, detach the rubber boots from the front of the gas tank and use a 1/2-inch socket to remove the bolts. Then remove the 2 bolts holding the rear of the tank in place. Finally, disconnect the electrical harness and pull the 2 breather lines in the back. Note that they may be zip tied underneath. Carefully remove the gas tank from the motorcycle. Now we're ready to install our power harness. First, cut any zip ties off and unsnap the wiring trough cover. Once that's done, we'll take the power connector side of our harness and run it up the clutch side of the motorcycle. We'll route our harness through the main opening up to the headlight area following the factory wiring harness. Make sure you have enough slack to make your battery and amplifier connections. Now we're ready to remove the factory radio and prep for installation of our PMX source unit. To get started, remove the 4 screws securing the bracket to the motorcycle using a T27 Torx. Next, disconnect the wiring from the back of the radio as well as any wiring on the top metal bracket. We suggest taking a photo with your mobile device so you can remember where each connector attaches. Next, we'll remove the upper vent by removing the 2 screws using a T27 Torx. Then disconnect the cluster wiring harness. Once that's done, use a 3/16 Allen driver to remove 4 screws securing the radio in place. Now we'll remove the 3 screws securing the metal bracket to the motorcycle using a T27 Torx. To remove the radio, remove the 4 screws securing the bracket to the radio using a T25 Torx and the screws holding the cluster in place using a T27 Torx. Be careful not to scratch the bezel. Now we're ready to install our PMX source unit. We've included 2 faceplate bezels. This one is for the shark nose style, and this one is for batwing fairings. With the Rockford Fosgate logo oriented at the bottom, snap the bezel in place and secure it to the radio using the provided screwdriver and screws. Next, carefully insert the radio, making sure not to scratch the faceplate or bezel. Then secure it in place using the included screws and isolators. Slide the isolator over each screw and use a 3/16 Allen wrench to secure the radio in place. Once that's done, you can reinstall the speedometer cluster and the metal support bracket. Now we're ready to prep our amplifier bracket. We'll install our 4 standoffs using a 10mm socket. Next, position the heatsink with the fins facing outward and secure it in place using a 1/8 inch Allen driver and the provided flathead screws. Now that we're done with that, we're ready to tune our amplifier. We offer an amp tuning guide that's available in the description of this video and through this kit's product details page at rockfordfosgate.com. Use the included 3mm Allen wrench to remove the control cover. Then use the tuning guide to verify all your settings are correct. A minimal adjustment should be needed to tune the amp. Once done, reinstall the cover. Now we're ready to secure the amplifier to the amp bracket using the supplied hardware and 2.5mm Allen wrench. Now before installing the amplifier, note the orientation of the Rockford Fosgate logo. Now let's take a closer look at the T-harness. The female T-harness is where the factory harness plugs into. Then the male end plugs into the radio. The amp inputs are for the front and rear signal input. The amp outputs are for the front and rear speakers. This is the amp turn on when using the DSR processor. These Y adapters split the front and rear outputs for additional speakers. Finally, these harnesses are used together for the DSR. Now we're ready to install our T-harness that allows us to interface our Rockford Fosgate audio with the Harley-Davidson electrical system. Take the factory connector and plug it into the female side of the T-harness and lock it in place. Then plug the new T-harness into the rear of the radio and lock the connector. Now we're ready to make our amplifier connections. We'll start with the amp input harness and connect the front and rear to the corresponding amp inputs. Next, connect the Y adapters to the amplifier's front out and rear out connectors. Take the T-harness labeled amp output and attach these to the corresponding amplifier's front out and rear out, noting you can use either end of the Y adapter. Once you're done, connect the subwoofer RCA adapter to the subwoofer line out on the back of the PMX source unit. Finally, plug the power into the amplifier connector and plug the blue wire into the empty connector on the top brake side. This blue wire is the amplifier remote turn on. Take note that there is likely an empty plug that needs to be removed before making your connection. Let's take a second to clean up our wiring in the fairing using the provided zip ties. Remove the existing USB cable and route the new USB extension to the same location. Finally, connect your radio antenna. Make sure to leave access to your Y adapters and RCA connectors. Now that we have that done, we'll clean up our wiring, reinstall the center trough, install our gas tank, and make our battery connections. Be sure the gas tank harness is connected before proceeding to prevent any error codes. Okay, now we're ready to test and tune the system. Refer to the tuning guide for testing procedures and make any adjustments needed. Remember, the tuning guide is available in the description of this video and on the product details page of our website. Now that everything is working properly, let's finish reassembling this motorcycle and get it back out on the road. As you can see, that install was pretty straightforward. If you prefer a professional do the install for you, we have a network of authorized Rockford Fosgate dealers that can be found on our website. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact our technical support. They can be reached Monday through Friday at 1-800-669-9899 or through live chat at the bottom of our website at rockfordfosgate.com. Until next time, I'm Eric. We'll see you again soon.